this? And she said, yeah, let's try. A year or two later, I entered the program. A year or two later, I got the registered trademark on it, and I'm the owner of this word INKERIJ, which is a advisory council for those leaders and organizations to set up relevant next steps. Um, I hold a couple of titles here in Los Angeles. Born in Compton, California, my mother was from Guyana, South America. Came here in 1965. She's recently returned back to her Lord last year. It's been 1 year this past Friday. And she instilled at a young age how to be responsible, being an immigrant coming to this country, how to be responsible, how to reject negativity. And so that kind of like plays a part in my work. So as a director of a foundation, which is Intellect, Love, and Mercy Foundation, founded by Imam Sadiq Safir, our mission is teaching life skills to replace social ills. What does that mean? Or how do we do that? We deliver this methodology through community organizing. We help Angelinos build power for around their needs, especially when it comes to civic and social issues. Youth mentoring. We have a football camp called Go Beyond the Game. Go Beyond the Game is an acronym. GAME is an acronym for gratitude, attitude, motivation, and education. So these are 4 principles that we teach the kids during a football camp. And our biggest program is called Humanitarian Day. Humanitarian Day is an advocacy for the homeless. So you know, as you all probably already heard, there's a crisis here in Los Angeles. And our foundation has been addressing this crisis over the last 20 years with an event in the month of Ramadan called Humanitarian Day. So this is how we convert charity into awareness, advocacy, and action for Humanitarian Day projects. What does Humanitarian Day look like in the month of Ramadan? It's an interfaith gathering of Muslims and everybody in the Los Angeles community. We come together in downtown Los Angeles. We lock down the city block and we set up booths. And the booths will go from everything from new clothing, and I say new clothing, from new clothing to hygiene kits, to dental care, to medical care by the Umar Community Clinic, and so on down the line. And we provide fresh foods. So imagine yourself not having any resources, being homeless on the street. And then one day you wake up around the corner from your camp on the sidewalk is an event called Humanitarian Day. And this is what we do to provide men, women, and children basic needs to get through their days out there on Skid Row. Please stop me because, you know, you don't have to interview me, Rabbi, because I could, you know, I do better in the interview style. Let me see.
It's great. It's great.
As a community organizer, I'm the president for LA Voice. LA Voice is a local community organizer that organizes around advocacy for homelessness, housing, immigration reform, and cutting the pipeline in the prison. So right now we knee deep into voter engagement as we got less than 60 days going towards November 3rd. How many of you are prepared and educated for November 3rd? Raise your hands. You ready? Now that you have raised your hand, it's very important that you teach those who do not know, those who want to know. Share your knowledge with them, especially around the props that is in your states, the props that is the propositions that are in my states. I'm located in California, so we have Prop 15 that's very important to us, Prop 20 that's very important to us, and we trying to get people to be educated to produce more money for schools. We want to divert funds of all the state dollars that's coming in to come into more community programming. So that's part of what I do. Also, the police accountability work is very important because, as you all know, enslavement here in the United States started like in 1619. My people have received were freed in 1865. And since then, it's been an ongoing tragedy of the discrimination and marginalization of communities of color, and in particularly African Americans through law enforcement, through the abuse of law enforcement and their authority. So right now we are here advocating in the city of Los Angeles, not only for African Americans, but for all communities who have a problem of being marginalized or being treated wrongfully by law enforcement. We got some pretty high profile cases. I want to bring to name and want you to remember these names. Dejon Kizzy, um, who else? Uh, Sandra Bland. Remember these names. I want you to remember Trayvon Martin. These are all individuals who were killed unarmed. Unarmed, didn't pose a threat. So it's a must that as a Muslim, my faith, because I truly believe I am one of the sons and daughters of Adam. I am one of the sons of Adam. And being a son of Adam, I was born with divine rights placed upon this earth. And with these divine rights, I cannot allow nobody to violate our rights. So it's incumbent upon me, because throughout the Quran is the holy book of Islam. Throughout the Quran, it constantly tells us to establish weight with justice and fall not short in the balance. That's kind of similar to your term tikkun olam. It's kind of similar to that, to establish justice wherever you are in the best way possible. For if we look at the prophetic lives of the men and women in the Quran, the Torah, and the Bible, they address the issues of their time, whether it was spiritual justice and or social justice. It all played a fold in their prophecy to the people. And as a monotheistic believer, I am here to do my best to exemplify my faith, not just as an African American, but as a person, as a son, as the son of Adam, to declare my right, even if I have to wait to the day of judgment. I'm here to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. I hope that was clear. I'm excited to join in this conversation, to hear what you have to say, and let's have a good conversation with the best attitudes going forward. I'm looking at Stu's background, y'all. You know, I don't know where he's at right now, but y'all should be jealous of that background. You know what I mean? Stu, you're doing too much, Stu.
Yeah, I know. I'm always taken by these backdrops.
And then Barbara, she got the whole universe behind her. Can't mess with Barbara.
So Umar, Umar, it's very interesting stuff. So,
yes, sir.
So to jump in here a little bit.
Yes, sir.
How do you think about God in your justice work? How do you think about Allah in justice?
Well, how do I think about Allah? Allah being a proper Arabic word for God. Al means the, Lah means God, because Islam is a monotheistic belief. God is my protector. God is my provider. God is the source of peace. There's 99 attributes that could explain the characteristics of the Creator, and I want to try my best. That's why I chose the name Hakim. Hakim is one of the attributes of God. He's the most wise. I just want to be a servant of the most wise and try to use my little bit of intelligence to build bridges between communities and people, so we could cross that bridge to Asgard and get that justice that we was promised. So God is definitely a factor for me, because he has given those who believe in him a promise. And I'm going to practice these 5 pillars. There's 5 pillars in Islam. And I'm going to practice these 5 pillars to the best of my ability to achieve that promise.
So there's an ends we may be advocating for, and ends we're working towards. How does Islam, or just your faith perspective in general, inform the means? How does it inform the way you do the work?
The way, how do Islam form the way that I do the work? Well, we have Allah, we have the messengers of God, and then we have the examples of the messengers of God. So we go from Adam to Noah to Abraham alayhi salam down to his two sons, which leads us to Muhammad. May peace and blessings be upon him. And in the example of Muhammad is his practices on how he understood our holy book, the Quran. So in this book, in God's speech, he tells us things like establish weight with justice and fall not short in the balance. Be kind be kind to the believers and be hard on those who disbelieve. God tells us to show charity to those who are in need. So in Prophet Muhammad's Sunnah, his practice, he tells us a smile is charity. He tells us if you see an injustice, you can do three things. You could change it you could change it with your hands, you could change it with your speech, or you can change it, or you can leave it in your heart. But if you leave it in your heart, that's the weakest of faith. So many of us has tried to change it with their hands, which is you could build something to represent justice. You could paint something to represent justice. You could write something that we make people reflect on justice. A lot of us use our speech, as you have the rabbis and the imams and the preachers in the pulpit, guiding, using their influence. Rabbi, you know about this, using your influence to encourage people to do the right thing. And then you have those of us who just leave it in our heart, and that's considered the weakest of faith. So I try and practice either using my hands or my speech.
Yeah. So how does your Black identity intersect with your Muslim identity? Which is to say, hold on, and there's really two parts to there. What are the barriers to engaging with Black Americans who are not Muslim as a Muslim? And what are the barriers to engaging with Muslims as a Black man? Are there barriers on both ends?
Well, for me, Black is just a color. My identity is more Moorish. I'm an African. I have roots. I have a culture. I identify to life through my identity. But there is a Jutox position there, because when you see me, you see an African American. You see, if you know me, you see a African American Muslim, and then you also see a Black man. So in this country, we wear like three hats, and because of the history that we have in this country, it brings a challenge. It brings a challenge, but it's a challenge that we take on because of my faith. God has given me a promise that I'm going to overcome that challenge. That as long as I practice these 5 pillars, as long as I be the most honorable in a set of people and try to do the right thing and give other people their respect, as long as I try to establish weight with justice, I'm doing my best to overcome these challenges that my identity faces. You see what I'm saying? Because, and especially in my history, I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to think that the civil rights era is over. You feel me? Because in 1964, 65, when they gave us the act, people got complacent and thought that the struggle was over, but not me. I'm moving it post-COVID. I'm moving into more of a human rights advocation, because because as a I don't want to keep harking on as a Muslim, as a person, as a human being, we were given inalienable rights from the Creator as a human being, and these rights are being violated by those who don't have a good attitude about their work. You know what I'm saying? So I'm into attitude politics right now. So if you have a good attitude, you're going to get good results. If you have a bad attitude in life, expect bad results.
Very interesting. Okay, so moving over to the policing issue,
Yes,
I would say, I mean, there's a whole range of views on this, but I would identify as kind of 5 different approaches to the police brutality issue. The first approach are those who say there's no problem. The police are basically the superheroes, Police are self-sacrificing public servants, and by and large can ubiquitously be understood as superheroes. The second approach would say, okay, we also have a very positive orientation towards the police force, and there's some bad apples in there, and it's important to regulate that very small group of bad apples. The third group would say, actually, the problems are a little bit more significant than some bad apples. We need some significant reforms, whether it's cameras or other forms of transparency and accountability. Okay, getting a little more serious here. The fourth we would say is about defunding, right? Say, this is fundamentally an arm of white supremacy, and we need to reduce the funding and the power of the police force, reduce the numbers and the power they have. And the fifth would be like an abolishment, right? We have to abolish the whole institution we call police force and start again with something entirely new. Not just reduce, but start over. I wonder where you fall out within how you understand the police force, and then moving from there towards what you think should be done to address this.
Man, why you bring me that big academic question, man? That's a big, long question, bro. How I understand that? All five are important. Let's deal with the abolishment. I don't think we should abolish law enforcement. What we should abolish is the culture, the negativity within law enforcement. So when I hear the word abolishment, I hear abolishing those negative, that negative behavior that produce all this killing that is going on, whether it's connected to mental health, whether it's finding some way to address the core issues that is producing bad behavior. When it comes to reducing or defunding, right now in Los Angeles, my buddy called me. He say, Umar, I'm looking at a tow truck with a militarized tank with LAPD on the side of it. So it's like we have a military police force. So this is what you're using the funds for? When you have in the communities programs that need this type of funding, when you want to cut the pipeline to prison, these private prisons that's targeting youth to come into those judges who use their power to sentence people to do these long terms. So when it comes to reducing the funding or finding new ways to use this funding, I'm for that. I think you mentioned also you have good and bad, and that's within all groups. There's good apples, there's bad apples, there's a good orange, there's an all right orange, there's and when it comes to cherries, you know what I'm saying? You have a good juicy cherry, then you had that one cherry, like, how did you get in the pack? That vetting has to be definitely reanalyzed of how you got into the pack. How did you slip through the ranks? What was your history in another city that made you apply for a job in this city? You know what I'm saying? So, all the vetting process needs to be relooked at. And what was the first two, bro?
Well, those who deny there's a problem at all.
Okay. No, the second one was, okay.
And the second was bad apples. Third was reforms.
So reforms.
Yeah.
If you living on Earth, if you know anything about poverty, then we all know that reform is necessary for everybody. I don't care how much money you got in the bank. You are a lot of people are living check to check or trying to conserve their dollar to go the furthest. So reform is necessary because there are problems that we're facing that needs to be reformed. So that's why I like conversations like this, because I'm not saying you don't think it's a problem, but for those who do not think it's a problem, it's these type of dialogues that's going to bring it to the forefront to have the conversation now internally.
Yeah.
That's why I asked earlier, for those who are ready for voting, if you have a little bit of knowledge about what to do, share it with the next person. Share that knowledge with the next person. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Umar, let me ask you one more question, and then we're going to open it up because I see Stu Churchill's got a lot of questions, good questions, and others are pouring in questions too. So here's my last question for you.
Yes, sir.
What is it that if there was a white American upper middle class, what is it that they need to understand, an experience they might not have access to? So someone told me, for example, recently, and maybe you can flesh this out and you can speak if this resonates for you or not. To a white American who's upper middle class, they might say, I'm not safe. I call the police. They're going to make me safe. Someone told me as a Black American, if I feel unsafe, I'm not going to call the police because that is going to also, that's going to make me a different kind of unsafe, right? Now, that's not necessarily pervasive, but does that perspective ring true to many people's experiences? And what is it that someone who might be removed from a certain type of urban dynamic, a Black man's reality in America, what is it that they need to understand here?
I think the key word in your whole dialogue is the word experience. How have your community experienced law enforcement? As I mentioned earlier, since 1865, my community has had a negative encounter with law enforcement. So we don't really perceive, we haven't, and that's not what, and there are some good stories, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is, when you look at the war on drugs, they decided to do a war on drugs, and guess who was the target of these drugs? My community. You see what I'm saying? So you had officers coming into my community and they perceived every African American as a potential drug dealer. Just because he had on a white t-shirt. Hell, that's all we can afford. That's all some can afford is a white t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? Because we have these places called swap meets, on your community, they may be called flea markets, and in the flea market, the most affordable wear, the most cost-effective wear is a t-shirt. So we have to begin to, it's an education that is going to be needed, and it's no better time than now to establish creating this awareness going forward. Because if people feel that is not a problem, it's because they have never experienced this type of treatment in their community, and it's unheard of. Is no, that doesn't happen. But no, this is what hip hop brought to the world. When Melly Mel dropped the song "The Message," people was like, "Where is this happening at?" You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until later on in the early 90s that NWA came with their most provocative song that people started to pay attention. So it was, and then if you look at the African American history, we expressed ourselves through arts, through blues, through jazz, through song, through dance, and the message of brutality or oppression was always embedded in our expression. So yes, it's a major challenge, and this is a good time for people to get to understand the different experiences that what makes up America.
Awesome. Eddie, I'm going to pass it over to you to manage some of these questions. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much, Umar. That was such a good presentation and good questions by Rabbi Shmuley. So we're really excited to have these type of dialogues, right? I want to revert back to what you were saying about having tough conversations. It's about these conversations that truly make strides, right? For folks who may not understand systemic racism or understand what it feels like to be Black and brown in the United States, and feel the different powers that come into play and how much people are truly oppressed. And I think that COVID and the emergence of social media has really brought upon a new heightened awareness and a new view, right? I was talking to somebody and I had to try to kind of work with them a little bit when we were talking about policing. He said, well, this is just now happening. And I took a step back and I said, no, what's happening right now is that folks are now having the technology to record what's happening, because what's been happening has been going on for a long time. So we have one question for you. How has COVID heightened any of your community work?
Oh man, um, I live under a term. I have a quote that I always go by. Diamonds are born under pressure. And this is some necessary pressure that we have to go through because when I got back from Belgium in March, I was assigned I had a scheduled event with the Red Cross, and COVID was brand new. The lockdown was like, our event was on the 11th. The lockdown was happening that Friday. So they asked us to change our talk and talk about COVID. So my talk, well, I'll give you a preview right now. We have to be better than when we entered COVID. We have to, I don't want to go through the front door. I want to go out the back door so I could come out better than I was when I entered COVID. So this work, the word today that they use is pivot. This work had made me think harder, think about deeper strategies on how to reach these care packages to the homeless. We were able to create 10 stipend jobs through the city of Los Angeles mayor's office for those on Skid Row because the mayor's office put out hygiene stations, and they came to our organization. So how can we get these hygiene stations observed? So I went to our network, and we was able to organize with the Skid Row Brigade 10 jobs. So COVID has pushed us, or pushed our work, to think outside of the box. All that previous training, that all those meetings that happened before COVID that people were inviting you to, those disaster relief trainings, the community organizing training, all that came into play. Has came into play during COVID. So so now we don't have to organize out of urgency. When COVID hit, a lot of people started organizing out of urgency. So right now, the urgency in America is education. We have to change the paradigm of education, because now teachers are not teaching in the classroom. They have to develop a new style of teaching. So COVID has definitely pushed me, has agitated me to rethink, reimagine, and rediscover what it means to do this work that I'm doing.
Yeah. So incredibly important. And I think that COVID definitely has brought out new forms of organizing as well. And I love that you talked about that sense of urgency, because we definitely feel it, right? A sense of urgency of getting folks aware, especially now with such a crucial election on our shoulders. Like, now more than ever must we mobilize our community like no other, right? And speaking about mobilizing, Maria Floro here had a great question, which
Yes.
it's a question that really home for me. She says, beyond the issue of police racist attitudes and actions, how do you broaden the awareness of people and other forms of injustice in this country?
Education is always going to be key. And when I say education, it sounds so generic, but no. Just like I said at the beginning, if you know a little bit, teach that. This conversation that we're having with everybody who's on this Zoom and those who are watching, I hope this serves as a bit of awareness that'll point you into the direction of getting that education that we need to change this whole get down. Because right now, as an African American, I'm not the only one that's facing this oppression in this country. Especially if you are a senior, you know what I'm saying? And if you are a senior, you might be living on a budget. You're facing the same issues that I'm facing. If you are a new millennial who just are graduating college, you're now facing economic injustice because you're looking for a gig now, just like everybody else, but the employment rate is low. we're now facing a whole new paradigm that we have to organize and come together and educate each other on how we're going to get through this and create new avenues for sustainability. You feel me? Because as Rabbi mentioned earlier, I'm an entrepreneur with a social mission. So I've taken my own experience, converted it into an advisory to help leaders and organizations create successful next steps. So right now, we're at a point where we have to get whatever education that's positive so we can contribute.
Most definitely. And I think that that education is such a crucial part. And when we organize and mobilize here at Intellect, for example, something that we hold near and dear to our cause is our immigration, trying to combat our broken immigration system. And some of the conversations we have with folks is that these things are cyclical, right? Like if we talk about immigration reform, you have to talk about private prison reform and the horrible criminalization of Black and brown folks. Like it's a cyclical thing that's based off of systems of oppression that hurt and marginalize Black and brown communities. So that's how we try to really emphasize how communities are affected by multiple things at once, right? Especially now in COVID, we see that one, are how broken our capitalistic society was because folks lost jobs in seconds, right? We saw how bad our economy and how fast it went down. That goes to show us how really brittle our economic system was. We went to seeing opening up our eyes with how broken the medical field was in our healthcare field, where folks were getting charged millions of dollars for almost dying due to COVID. And I think that we started to see the cyclicalness of events and how everything kind of is touched by everything. And I want to go back to a question that Stu had early on. He said, Umar, how does your work interact with the LAPD? What's the nature of your relationship with local law enforcement?
Stu, why are you asking tough questions, bro? Me personally, I have a professional relationship with LAPD. Just before this call, there was a Days of Dialogue, a call that I was on where they had community members have a tenacious conversation with the new cadets who are coming out of the academy. So I believe that if you're not at the table, then you own the menu. And what does that mean? That means you have to be involved in order to get your voice heard. So our organization, Encourage M Foundation, Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Shura Council, ISLA LA, LA Voice, we have chosen to be at the table to represent those who cannot speak for themselves. So at this table, okay, so King Arthur, the round table, I'm not King Arthur, but at the round table, right, you have all these different positions around the table. One may be the nonprofit sector, one may be the business sector, one may be the community sector, one is the law enforcement sector. So at this table, everybody gets to interact and discuss issues that's important to their work individually. So as I said, if you're not at the table, then you own the menu. So I have a professional relationship with LAPD, and I try to utilize this relationship to facilitate, to build power for my community.
Right, and I really like this question too, because sometimes like you're almost forced to work with what you're trying to combat, to try to mobilize and build power, which is a great thing that I always look into. And in respect, like Uriel Tzedek, we don't agree with everything at all that ICE does, but at points when we were helping out asylum seekers, we had to coordinate with them to get the right amount of drops, the right amount of people at the right time. And it was like, you have to work with them like angrily, you're like, okay, I'll do it, but I have to do it.
Don't get it twisted, because in a battle, the soldiers on the field may be battling, but the generals and the lieutenants and the diplomats are all talking to end that battle. You see what I'm saying? So the work that we do while there's a battle on the field, we have to engage the other side in order to come, so we can understand their moral universe and come up with a strategic policy that's going to create a win-win situation for us all. So yes, while people are battling, it is a jukebox position in the sense that you have this right here, but then you got to go talk to the same people to end the problem. My real quick, when we was in the UK, my man, he said, fighting starts with two and it ends with two. So you're always going to be engaging that person throughout the battle.
Yeah. And I think that I love what you also, I really resonated, and to echo off of that, saying like you're looking at the bigger picture of what it looks like to build systems that work for our entire community. So just a reminder, folks, you are welcomed to continue to ask questions on the chat. We are monitoring both on our Facebook. You can send us direct messages on Facebook and or on the chat. If not, I'm just going to continue asking these questions that we're getting in from different folks.
What about the people on the screen? Do they have any questions?
Yeah, go ahead and ask a question if you want to, for the folks that are on the Zoom call.
Yeah, I would love to hear from the people on the screen and see your faces, you know. Let's talk. Don't let me do pop-up. I'll call on you. Okay, Barbara Gold, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. And you?
Good. I can't complain, young sister. Tell me.
I did ask a question on the pop-up.
What's the question?
I asked, do you think the situation with the police and people of color have gotten worse recently, or has it just the fact that we hear more about it?
I think the situation between police and people of color has gotten worse because it went so long unaddressed. It went so long unaddressed, and people have ignored the situation. And now that we have technology that's capturing everything on camera, now it's in the public face. So
Okay.
Now it's time for us to address it.
Okay, so
now it's gotten worse.
Great. Now that you're working with the LAPD, do you see that situation getting better in that department? And then also, is there someone like you who is involved in other areas of the country working with the police, and has that helped?
So when you see me, know that there's 10 other me's that's working around the country doing the same work that I'm doing. You like before, you have Empower based in New York. You have Muslim Public Affairs Council based here in Los Angeles. CARE LA, ISLA LA. You have a Jewish Federation that's working here in Los Angeles. You have a New Ground Muslim Jewish Dialogue that's all working for social justice. So I'm just one person out of the microcosm. I'm just one person out of the spectrum of workers. To the first part of your question, LAPD is climbing out of a long history. And since I'm privileged to see their theory of change, they are making steps into changing their narrative of that badge. Are they there? No. Do they have a long way to go? Yes. Do they need help doing it? The community gonna have to get involved and mobilize ourselves so we could give them and answer the questions that they need for insights in changing their work.
So how long have you been in this position where you've been supporting, and other organizations have been supporting each other in this goal?
I've been doing this work since, man, I originally wanted to own a record company, you know what I'm saying? But a certain type of music came out and I couldn't promote that to the Muslim community. So I've been doing this work since 2002. And in my journey of doing this work, I've met and joined some incredible organizations from different sides of the spectrum, from the Catholic community to the Jewish community to the Baptist community. There's a lot of people that's doing this work, and I find out that this is how I feel. I don't know if you heard the term. This is how I'm paying my rent on Earth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who else?
Okay, we have a question here from Maria Floro. What, in your view, are the effective strategies that bring racism and other forms of discrimination and injustices to the attention of policymakers and government officials? What do you
Economic justice.
What do you do with the backlash that can have occurred?
One of the best ways to challenge racism and injustices is for those who feel marginalized to take control of their own economy and use it to benefit their community. Because for the fact that we may not be owning the houses in our community, we could start buying the homes in our community. We could start developing new businesses in our community so we could fund our own sustainability. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the beautiful things of that community, what was called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They found a way to support themselves. So the best way to combat racism and all the injustice is to be self-determined and do for self.
Thank you so much. Stu, you have a question. Go ahead.
I do. Umar, I would imagine that most of the alliances that you have, the partnerships and collaborations that you have, are with what we might label progressive groups or progressive organizations. Do you have any alliances with any conservative-leaning organizations or groups?
Can you describe conservative for me? Because I know many people from different backgrounds. So when you say conservative, do you mean?
I mean politically conservative.
I mean, people. I find out you can have a progressive who's conservative in their ways. And that's just to be honest. You can have a conservative who's really progressive in their ways.
Right.
It's just about getting to know the different people and learning what they're interested in and expounding on their expertise and bringing that talent.
So in your collaborative or in your network of alliances and groups with whom you work, do you find that you're seeing people or groups from across a broader ideological perspective?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, now this is where what you're really hitting on is a difficult conversation that we need to have. Because I posed this question before to a Jewish audience I was speaking to, and I asked them, are you ready to share your origin or your narrative? Because as we know, we all come from one and we're going to go back to one. So it feel like we're going back to one now. So we all have a lot in common. So the different ideologies, the different faith backgrounds, the different people, we all share this thing called planet Earth. And that's where the dialogue is taking place. So right now in this Zoom, the dialogue is taking place. But the homework I want to give everybody that's watching this, once this Zoom call ends, don't let the conversation stop. Have those tenacious conversations, because you are closer to that person who may not, in your family or in your community, who may not reflect the conversation that we have in here. And you could challenge that. You could use your goodness or your influence or your knowledge to challenge those thoughts, because you're closer to them. You have the influence to talk about the elephant in the room with that person.
Thank you so much, Umar and Stu, for such a great question and in-depth process that makes us really dig deep into ourselves and who we are. And I think it's an important thing to address our own implicit biases when we're talking about tearing down systems of oppression, right? Is like addressing your own implicit biases and how you see and identifying your anti-Blackness. I was in a circle of other Jews of color when we were talking about like how anti-black are you? And I remember the presenters talking about this, and he shared about how he was like, I'm not racist. I don't have a single racist thought in my mind. And the first person that's talked about their issues with racism and colorism was a black woman. And he's like, well, snap, if they said it, I'm next. Like, how am I going to say I'm not racist, right? So I think that it's important to address our own implicit biases, which are not necessarily there to really be malicious with, but we have to address them and tear those down.
Yeah, there's it's not the big biases that I'm worried about. It's not the macro ones it's the micro ones that I'm worried about. It's the little bitty microaggressions that get in the way of progress. You see what I'm saying? There's a teacher by the name of Jane Elliott, and she asked her question. She asked her audience, who would trade places with a black person or an African American? Nobody answers, right? She say, I don't think you heard the question. Which one of you would trade places with the African American? Nobody answers. So then she goes on to say that by your silence, that means you know something is wrong. And it's that microaggression that we have to start addressing. What is really wrong that prevents us from wanting to trade places with another human being to pursue happiness? You feel me? So yes, it's those microaggressions that we have to start purging our hearts of, that gets in the way of progress, that inhibits what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Umar, for having these conversations with us. Looks like we're running out of time. I appreciate it. These are the tough conversations in the dialogue that we're supposed to have, right? Like these conversations are really what's going to change our systems and change our societies for the better. And I love that you talked about tikkun olam. And in Judaism, we also have tzedek tirdof, which means like justice you shall pursue. And to me, that's something that I really resonate with, because you see, I said justice twice, because there's justice that's directly impacting, and then there's a systemic justice of also like, what is the big picture and what are the systems in place that continue to hurt people. Ariel Lieutenant gives you a huge shout out and a thank you. We are so honored to have these dialogues and conversations. I'm sorry that Rabbi Shmuley unfortunately had to take off a little bit early, but you know, family stuff comes up. So thank you once again, Umar, for having these great conversations. Thank you to everybody who's watching the video. Reminder to follow us on Facebook, catch up with us. Make sure that if you missed this or you want to share this with somebody else, we'll send the recording over and keep the recording going. Shana Tova to the folks who observe. And I hope that everybody has a good day, and let's keep doing this. Thank you so much, Umar.
Thank you, family. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Till next time.